we had to throw some trig in there. So here we go. The first thing I need to do is take the derivative with respect to x of xy. Well, going to the side, this is two separate functions, so you have to use the product rule. So my first function is x, my second function is y. The derivative of x is 1. It needs no other factors. The derivative of y is 1, but since I took the derivative of y, it also needs a dy dx with it. So the left side of this equation, when I take the derivative, would be function 1 d2 plus function 2 d1. 1 d2 plus 2 d1. Okay, on the right side I need to take the derivative of tangent. So the derivative of tangent is secant squared. Now, but remember you have to also take the derivative of the angle. So the derivative of the angle would be the derivative of y. And the derivative of y is 1, but remember you have a dy dx there. So cleaning this up, we have x dy dx plus y equals the secant squared of y dy dx. Now you'll say, well, which way do I move it? It really doesn't matter. You just need your dy dx's on the same side. I'm going to move this x over. So y would actually equal the secant squared of y dy dx minus x dy dx. So now my dy dx's are on the same side. I need to factor out a dy dx to get it by itself. When I take the dy dx's out, it leaves me with secant squared of y minus x. Divide both sides by secant squared of y minus x to cancel it out. And y would equal, dy dx would equal, there we go, y over secant squared of y minus x. They also ask you to find the slope of the curve. Okay, the slope is the same thing as the derivative. So the derivative is the same thing as dy dx. So basically for this particular expression, they're asking you to find dy dx. Now most of it's going to be pretty easy except for this middle guy right here. So the derivative of 3y to the fourth would be 12y cubed. It had a y, so that's a dy dx part. The derivative of 4x is 4. This red part here we have to go to the side and do. The derivative of negative 4, the derivative would be 0, and that equals 0. So let's jump to the side and take care of this particular piece. Now I like to handle my negative inside the derivative, but it is a matter of personal preference. My first function is a negative x squared, and my second function is sine y. d1 would be negative 2x with no other factors. d2 would be the cosine of y. That takes care of the trig part, but you have to also take care of the angle part. So the derivative of y would be 1 dy dx. So let's throw that green part back into the problem. So it says function 1 times d2 plus function 2 times d1. Okay, now I ran out of room, but remember the derivative of 4 was 0, and the derivative of 0 was 0. So that's how it looks to there. So what I get is 12y cubed dy dx plus the whole number 4 minus x squared cosine of y dy dx minus 2x sine y equals 0. You'll say, now why doesn't that sine y have a dy dx? Well, look back at the green steps over here. When we took function 2, this particular term here, this sine y, it wasn't a derivative. So, since it wasn't a derivative, it didn't have a sine y. Since it wasn't a derivative, you didn't have a dy dx. You only put a dy dx when you take the derivative of a y. Now, cleaning this up, I need to shift the 4 to the other side and shift this 2xy to the other side, leaving these dy dx terms. So when the 4 moves over, it becomes negative, and when the 2x moves over, it becomes positive. Take a dy dx out of both of these, factor it out. Now you have to get the dy dx by itself. So I'm going to divide. And finally, I have my dy dx, which unfortunately is not the answer to the question. Now I notice I made a copying error, so let's go back and fix that really fast. Going back, let me make it blue. This little part right here was an x squared, and I forgot to copy it, so let's go back and put that in there, and that of course would make it there. Now then, glad we saw that. Now again, that was not my answer. Looking back at the problem, I asked you to find the slope. Well, the slope is dy dx, but I need the slope at a certain point. And the point that's asked here is the point 1, 0. So we need to plug the point 1, 0 into this function. Everywhere, since it's a point 1, 0, and that came from the problem, x is 1, y is 0. So let's plug that in. And of course, that's your slope. So my slope would equal negative 4 plus 2 times x sine of y, 12 times y cubed minus x squared times cosine of y. Now, across the top, I have a negative 4. Looking at the second group, I remember that the sine of 0 is 0. So this second part would be 2 times 1 times 0, so that would just be a 0 on the back. Okay, looking at this bottom part, 12 times 0 would just be 0. So what you would get on the bottom is a negative 1 squared cosine of 1. So you get negative 4 over negative 1, which gives you 4. Now you'll say, wait a second, you said negative 1 squared was negative 1. Technically, this particular symbol here means the negative of x squared. Well, that means negative 1 times x squared. So when you actually put that 1 in there, this is how it looks. And that's why this piece right here is a negative 1. Be really careful. If that negative had been in parentheses, you would have said a negative squared gives you a positive 1. But it wasn't in parentheses. It was out in front. So that means it's the negative of x squared, which means negative 1 times x squared. Anyway, your final answer for this one is 4.